And welcome to this very special report. Today, the title is Jfk-X, the documentary Decode with none other than Mr. Jay Weidner. You can find his work at jweidner.com and also here specifically on jfkx.org. Mr. Weidner, Jay, welcome back to the show and Happy New Year. How are you, man?
Hey, I'm good. How are you? Happy New Year.
Thank you so much. I'm doing well. Quite busy already. We're kicking off 2024 in style and in vogue. And of course, there's a lot of news coming out in the last couple of days, making the term conspiracy theory not so dirty anymore. Jay, let's get into that a little bit here before we get into the show. Where do you see, as things are going in now in the last couple of days here of January 1, 2, and 3 leading up to today, a lot's coming out. We're looking at the Epstein list also. Where do you think 2024 is going? Let's get into that a little bit here before we get into this Decode with your amazing documentary here, the Jfk-X and solving the mystery, the crime of the century. Jay.
Well, I personally know of I have a lot of friends that are doing a lot of really incredible research, and we talk among ourselves. And I can tell you right now, there's a bunch of bombs about to be dropped on every level, not just politics, but cultural, science. It's going to be unbelievable. And what it is like we talked about the last time, we're moving out of the Kali Yuga into the Dvarapara Yuga, and things that were, murky and indistinct are now becoming clear and in focus. And that's because we're getting in more of this intergalactic energies from the center of the galaxy, and every day it gets bigger and better, and we can see more and see more clearly. And frankly, I think that my film Jfk-X is part of this. I think we couldn't see what we saw before, but now we can. And I think that's going to happen on so many different levels. And I myself am preparing to drop several bombs over the next month and a half that I'm just done. I've reached this point where I'm too old to fool around with it, and I just want to get everything out. And I've just decided, I've talked it over with everybody that I know that knows what I'm talking about. And they said, yeah, let's do it. Let's just get it out. Let's just done with it. Let's get everything out now because it's going to cause this ramification effect. If I'm brave enough to say it, then somebody else will be brave enough to say it. And then pretty soon, it's the Spartacus, I am Spartacus at the end of the movie, right? Everybody's standing up. They're all Spartacus. Yeah. But before I go on, I wanted to show you something. This is my new UAP detector. I got this from Chris O'Brien, the famous UFO writer, developed this. It's a 360-degree camera here that I'm putting up on my roof. I have two of these. I'm putting them up this week. And it detects anything moving around in the sky. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to get some plasma bodies and UFOs and all that. And so I'll report to you back on what I discover as I put these up. But it's pretty exciting. Wow, so that's another thing that's going on is we're triangulating. We're going to have 3 outposts of these UAP detectors in southern Colorado, in which we'll be able to triangulate any sightings or anything that's seen from 3 different positions. So that's kind of exciting.
It's very exciting. And let me know if I can help in any way putting this information out once you've tested it. Yeah. And if you have stories to tell, like that's going to be very fascinating to a lot of our audience members. And I know that for the most of us too, and who followed my show, they've listened to Cliff High looking out at the sky here with his night vision goggles, everything they're seeing. So it's very encouraging that more and more people are paying attention to this. So we have the David Grushes of the world testifying at Congress, but nothing's going to happen until you and I actually get part, or everybody watching the show get into this fight here and actually look up and do the opposite of that movie. Don't look up. So that was a great movie, by the way, if you guys haven't seen it.
It was a great movie.
Yeah, Jay, before we start, so first of all, let me go back here to the Rumble feed. There's people on YouTube also. Thank you so much. We're almost at 2,000 watching there live. I want to get into the term conspiracy theorist before we go too far. Now, ostensibly, and for people who are watching the show, the people who watch Jay Weidner and Reality Check on YouTube, they're coming to the conclusion here that a lot of these conspiracy theories are now becoming conspiracy fact time and time and time again. We're on a winning streak here. Although we didn't get into it to win, we just wanted to get into the truth. But it turns out that Yeah, the truth here is absolutely stranger than fiction. So talk about where this term originated and how actually that ties into the JFK assassination.
Yeah. So right now, if you're keeping score, it's conspiracy theorists 264, and non-conspiracy theorists are still at 0. So we're winning on every level. In fact, I don't even have to defend it anymore. I used to have to like go through this whole rigmarole of defending conspiracies and where they came from and how the CIA invented the term after the Kennedy assassination. But I don't even have to do that anymore. Everybody just knows it, and that's a big thing. So yeah, so the term conspiracy theory is a derogatory term because every journalist or anyone who wants to find out the truth is going to be looking at conspiracies, because that conspiracies are anything by 2 or more people that are concocted in secret. So everything can be a conspiracy. My wife and I going to a movie can be a conspiracy between the 2 of us. Yeah. We're not going to tell the kids, right? We're going to go see this movie, right? So the whole term is ridiculous and stupid. And all it really did was ignite, as I point out in Jfk-X, all it did was every time that they tried to downplay like conspiracies, all it does is just reignite it over and over. You'd think that they would learn to stop doing it, because all it does is get everybody back into the game again. And I've been around long enough to watch it over and over. In the JFK thing, there would be this huge surge of interest, and it would die off. And then somebody would come out and say, oh, JFK was a womanizer. And then all of a sudden there'd be this big surge of interest again. And it was like, you guys keep trashing JFK, and they did for 60 years. Only now are they coming out and saying, oh, he was a good guy and all that. That is BS. For the last 60 years, you guys have been putting out, all of the mainstream media has been putting out negative stories about JFK and him being a womanizer and in the mob and all of these things. And the only person besides him that's received that kind of negativity is Trump.
Mr. Trump, yeah.
Exactly. And now they're, and this is what's interesting, man. This is the most interesting part, because I did not anticipate this. So it was my birthday last year, and I got a call from a famous filmmaker, and he's like, happy birthday. I was like, thanks. And he's like, well, so who are you mentoring? How many people are you mentoring? He said to me. And I said, what? And he goes, well, I'm mentoring 5 people. How many are you mentoring? You've got all this knowledge. How many people? And I said, nobody. And I started feeling guilty because he was guilt tripping me. And so I started talking to this young guy, Ryder Lee, and I said, you want to make a film? And he said, yeah. And so I said, I'll finance it, and you do the most of the work, and I'll write it. And so in 88 days from the point of that conversation to the point that it got released on Amazon Prime, it was 88 days total. It was the fastest film I ever made. And there were no films on board about JFK that I could find, because I looked, because it was a competition to me, right? In June of 2023. By September, 2 months after my film had come out, there were 17 JFK projects going on Netflix, Amazon, Paramount, Hulu, National Geographic, and every one of them is carefully designed, if you watch it, to refute what's in Jfk-X, to find witnesses who say they said things that they never said before. For instance, like the guy that found the bullet on the back seat of the car. The Secret Service guy came out about 3 weeks after my film came out and said that he found the magic bullet on the back seat of the limousine, and he put it on the stretcher at Parkland Hospital. Like, wait a minute, that is that's obstruction of justice. That is outrageous. That guy isn't even arrested. I understand he's 86, but still, that guy is admitting that in a major crime, he obstructed justice, and that evidence he contaminated the evidence, for sure. And anyway,
you're talking about the magic bullet that changed direction 3 times. That's the one. just to be
Yeah,
clear.
which now we know didn't even exist. That was on the car, and then of course the BS explanation that, oh, it must have popped out of his back. Well, wait a minute, it ended up in Connolly.
Yeah, how did it come back?
And what I really enjoy most about Jfk-X is how I point out all the contradictions in this case. So we have the Zapruder film, which shows a bullet hitting JFK here, but then we show the autopsy picture and there's no wound here at all.
Yeah.
It's like, huh? You guys can't even keep your story straight. And, you know, and how no one else has ever pointed this out. No JFK conspiracy theorists have ever pointed any of this out, which is really, really odd.
Okay,
and
we're going to get into all of this step by step by step. I realized yesterday, so first of all, Jay, chapeau in France, I tip my hat to you. I saw the documentary in late December. I watched it again last night to prepare for this show, and I'm like, I was head blown. I knew it was going to be great. You do great work, but I'm like, guys, everybody should watch this documentary. I'm telling you, it's such a departure, and there's so many intelligent, thoughtful, methodical questions that Jay brings up in this documentary that you have no choice to look at the previous evidence and say, oh my God, we've been fucked with again. So having said that, I watched the show with Sarah. She had not seen any of the previous stuff on the JFK assassination files. And so it's probable that people in our chat now are in that same position. So what I'd like you to do, maybe to begin with a little bit, is talk about the Warren Commission, but also how it was portrayed in JFK, the Oliver Stone movie. That seems to be the baseline upon which everybody has at least a foothold into this story. Start there, maybe spend 4 or 5 minutes there to explain what that main theory is from the Warren Commission, and then I'll play the trailer for your Jfk-X documentary, and we'll get into all of these things here step by step by step to bring the audience along with us in your documentary and your thought process creating this film. Let's start here, Jay.
Yeah. So where do you want me to start?
The Jfk-X as it's portrayed by Oliver Stone, getting into the Warren Commission and the baseline of what people think about the JFK assassination story.
So there's two theories on the JFK assassination in the general public. One is the one propagated by the Warren Commission, which is a commission that was put together by LBJ, the guy who followed Kennedy as president. And then the second one is the conspiracy group. And these two are diametrically opposed to each other. They believe exactly the opposite. The government people think that Oswald used a high-powered weapon, Carcano, a rifle from the 6th floor of the depository, shot down through the window and got Kennedy twice, first on the first shot, then missed, and got him on the third shot again. And that is the magic bullet, supposedly, that spun around and hit Connolly. And then the conspiracy theorists say, no, no, no. The Zapruder film clearly shows that the guy was over the grassy knoll and that he shot Kennedy from the side and that there's a giant conspiracy and it's all covered up. And Oliver Stone got involved in it after he watched the great documentary series, The Men Who Killed Kennedy. He got involved in this whole thing and made what I consider to be one of the best movies ever made, JFK, by Oliver Stone. As a filmmaker, I'm talking about, it is one of the most incredible films ever made. That's all I can say. It's just
and Costner, it was one of Costner's best roles. Also, he did a great job.
Yeah, it was actually. It was a great film. But you know, there are problems in the film, and here's what happened with the whole pedigree here. About 10 years ago, I found Oliver Stone had the Zapruder film enhanced for the film for JFK back in '91. And about 10 years ago, somebody put it up on the internet, the complete enhanced version. It was up on YouTube, and I saw it. And it was only up for about 6 weeks, and it got taken down. I don't know why. You know, in those days, everything was so freeform, you could see it. And so I watched it like 50 times, and I saw everything that I saw in Jfk-X. I saw then. And I was completely flabbergasted by what I saw. And then I went back and I watched JFK by Oliver Stone, and I noticed that he carefully edits around the most important parts of the Zapruder film and leaves them out of his film. So my conclusion is that first off, I'm a huge admirer of Oliver Stone. So I mean, he's like top 5 filmmakers of all time for me.
Right.
My conclusion is this: that he went ahead, he wrote the screenplay, he finally got the money, because that's how things work in Hollywood, and then he got the money to pay to get the Zapruder film enhanced, which cost like $100,000, a lot of money in 1991. And he's in the middle of pre-production, probably lining up the shoot and everything, when he finally gets the enhanced version, and he turned it on and he saw exactly what I saw. But he realized that, hey, I'm into this for millions of dollars. I've already written the screenplay for this. I've hired Tommy Lee Jones and Kevin Costner, and I can't go back. So I think Oliver Stone knows exactly what's in Jfk-X. And, the silence is deafening. It really is. The silence from Hollywood is deafening. And I'm waiting now for some Hollywood technicians to come forth like they did after my moon landing expose and come out and say, this guy's right. What he's saying is right. This is what's going on here. And
they were too far into production to reverse the course on that ship.
Yeah. And I think Oliver Stone has to know, because he's a filmmaker. Yeah. And that's the thing about Jfk-X, which makes it different from every other JFK documentary ever made. And that is this. First off, the genius of the film is that Ryder and I, the filmmakers, asked ourselves the question, what would happen if the Zapruder film was run through that same software that they're using nowadays to enhance old movies, so that it looks like it was shot in 4K and 24 frames a second. All the scratches are gone and everything. And that was the genius of the film, is that we show you the Zapruder film as you've never seen it before. It's in 4K. It's run in regular speed, and you can see everything. It's like looking through a piece of glass. And everything that all the eyewitnesses say, we show a lot of the eyewitnesses, what John Connolly says, we show it. It's just not in the film. Sorry. What you're saying is not there. And then, there's all sorts of mysterious non-actions being taken by people and all sorts of things. And again, so many questions are raised that the conspiracy theory people never raise, ever raise.
Right. I think you did an amazing job. Okay, so let's break it down. In my mind, when I looked at this and I said, okay, if we're going to do a good job in the whodunit, typically you go around and you ask, well, who has motive, right? Who are the enemies of JFK? Well, here we have military-industrial complex to some extent. He wasn't a very pro warmonger, same as Trump, by the way. So he has that same enemy in common. We have the bankers with respect to the control of the central banks, and perhaps this idea that he wanted to bring back silver certificates or bring a monetary policy back into the control of the United States. We have the CIA, of course, which he was famous for being angry at, wanting to disperse to all corners of the wind here after the Bay of Pigs incident. And of course, we had the mob and all of this. So pick one, anyone. A lot of people here did not like him. Speak about maybe those 4 enemies, how they tie in, and eventually we'll get back into, because I talked about the military-industrial complex, how that maybe relates to space, and perhaps how this is tying into the fight that we're going to see here in 2024. So let's talk about those enemies a little bit here to set the stage for the audience, how serious they were, and how, in fact, there were hits called on him.
All right. So I gave a talk at MUFON a couple of years ago about this, and I showed how JFK and Forrestal, the first Secretary of Defense, went to Germany at the end of World War II and went to all the places where the Germans were developing their craft. And that Forrestal came back and started MJ-12 to have a group of elites look at all this and try to make some sort of assertion. And Forrestal was JFK's like mentor. And they would sit, they're both Irish, both Catholic. They would sit around and talk. It was well known, and it would be in quiet and in just the two of them. And I believe that, of course, I believe Forrestal got murdered, probably for saying too much. And by the way, the last person to see Forrestal alive was LBJ, which is very interesting. And and I
And just
believe,
to be clear, the story is that he jumped out of that
he
hospital.
jumped out of the 13th story window of the
Right.
Bethesda hospital, the same hospital that JFK had his supposed autopsy.
Right.
And then I believe what happened is that JFK became president, and then he almost immediately, within 6 months, made his famous speech about we're going to go to the moon by the end of the decade. And NASA had already told him, Werner von Braun had already told him that we'd have to build a rocket the size of the Empire State Building to get to the moon, and we can't do that. There's no way possible. So Kennedy knew that they didn't have the ability to get to the moon and back, but they did have other things that would help them get to the moon and back. And he knew all about that because Forrestal had told him about it. And so Kennedy was using the ruse of trying to get to the moon by regular rockets by the end of the decade, I believe, to force NASA's hand and make them release the technology.
Disclose the technology, yeah.
But they didn't. They hired Stanley Kubrick and faked it. See, so I say they went to the moon. I'm just saying what they showed us isn't real.
Right.
And besides, it would be very hard to take photographs on the moon because it's filled with gamma rays, and it's just, there's no way in the world. But anyway, so with this kind of knowledge, we come to understand who these enemies that Kennedy is making, who are they really? Who is the central bankers, the military industrial complex, the CIA, and the mob? Who are they? And did the Kennedys know?
And who's above them?
Exactly. In other words, Kennedy was his brother, mostly Bobby, was investigating the frontline shock troops for the Elohim. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, they came to realize it. As I said in my last show here, that the most of the occult groups in Europe had known about all of this by the early 1900s, and about the translations of the Bible and how they were wrong and what the Bible was really saying. And they began to look around at the world and try to understand what was going on with these translations. And this all got to Forrestal and Kennedy and everything, and it may be the whole purpose behind the secret space program. For all we know, we don't know. I mean, you know, right. we got cut off. We don't know any more than what they're doing, except what we can see and hear from insiders and things, if they're even telling the truth. And so I believe that Kennedy had a head full of ideas when he came into office that we are totally unsuspecting of. And he came in and he tried to force something to occur. And by doing that, he saw the face of the enemy. And he realized that the enemy was too strong to vanquish. It was too pervasive. He didn't realize that the CIA and the mob had married in the 50s. The CIA couldn't do like assassinations on American soil because it was against their charter. So they hired the mob to do it. And so pretty soon the mob is like, oh yeah, we're the hitmen for the CIA. And
you can't touch us. You can't investigate us.
Touch us. Yeah. Exactly. And that's why they were untouchable. And same thing with
that's kind of like SNC-Lavalin here in Canada. They keep doing these deferred prosecutions because they were acting on behalf of the government to do regime changes across the world. But I digress. We shouldn't get into that too much here. So folks, if you're just new to this and you're like, what the hell is what's Jay talking about? Who are these Elohim? Go watch this episode. This is part 2 of The Angels, The Great Deception Exposed. Jay and I recorded that on the 21st. It's based on, in part, some of the work by Mauro Bellino. He wrote the book here, The Naked Bible. So you don't want to miss that episode. If you haven't seen it, it'll give you a lot more context here for this particular decode here today. And on that note, too, I want to inform you that I will be interviewing Paul Wallace. Paul Wallace is the author of the Eden Conspiracy series. He's talking about paleo contact again here. So in the same subject matter here. So this will be part 3 of The Angels and the Great Deception Exposed. That's going to be on January 9 at 7 p.m. Eastern. I can't wait to have.
You don't want to miss that one.
It's going to be a cool one. Okay, Jay, thank you for setting the stage here. We've talked about the enemies. Why don't we do this? I want to play the trailer now. So let me just switch to decks here for a second here. Just make sure we have sound for the audience members. Window, this one here. So we'll play the trailer of your Jfk-X, and then I want to get into. I don't want to spoil the beans for everybody here. So this is why it's difficult for me to do this decode here today, because at the same time, it's so mind-blowing, but at the same time, I don't want to give too many spoilers. I want people to go and see this documentary. So we'll play the trailer first, and Jay, I'll have a couple of questions for you, and then I'll leave it to you, perhaps, to lead me as to how much you want to share about this amazing documentary you've put together. So let me put this on the screen, share screen. There you go. There you go. Okay, so let me play this, and let me know right away if you can hear the sound here. This should work. Okay, play.
The entire world was shocked when the President of the United States was assassinated in Dallas, Texas on November 22nd, 1963.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Much of the world has wondered what really happened that day. Countless conspiracy theories have sprung up in an attempt to understand what really happened to President Kennedy. Was it the CIA, the mob, a lone assassin? Who exactly killed JFK? Jfk-X, Solving the Crime of the Century, is an investigation into these events. The film answers the most basic questions about what really happened on that day. You will discover the truth behind one of the most traumatic events in world history. You will see the assassination of JFK with new eyes as the realization of the truth is revealed. Jfk-X, Solving the Crime of the Century, will unveil the truth behind the events of November 22nd, 1963, like no film has ever done before.
All right, guys, there you go. That's a good snippet for you. Thank you so much, Ajay, for this trailer and sharing it with me for the audience here today. It's really cool. I want to start with something that's obvious that hit me right away, and I want to bring it in context. Let me just bring my volume back down here a little bit so I don't blow the speakers. With a couple of things that happened over the last number of years. So first of all, here in Canada, a couple of years ago, we had this Corporal Cirillo shooting up Parliament Hill. And this made the whole story, and this was a justification for putting more money into our equivalent of our spy agencies here in Canada. But during that event, oddly enough, let me just see if I can change the decks here. During that event, what was interesting was that all of the cameras, the traffic cameras in that particular area were down for maintenance exactly during this particular very critical time in Canadian history. So I was like, okay, maybe that's just a coincidence, right? And then again, I'm like, oh, wait, that happened again here when Epstein supposedly suicided himself. Oh, yeah, all the cameras in his cell and around his cell were all down for maintenance. That's interesting. And also the same thing happened, I guess, with Princess Diana in the tunnel. The cameras weren't working. So I bring that up because in your documentary, one of the things that you kind of blow my mind with, first of all, is this guy's a rock star. Everywhere he lands at the airport, there's thousands of people. Everybody's there. But suddenly at the grassy knoll, there's like nobody there. The mainstream media is not there. Explain that to your audience members and see how that is one of those coincidences that make you go, Jay.
Yeah. So Dallas, Texas had 3 network affiliate stations there at the time. ABC, CBS, and NBC. I used to work at a news station, local news station. I know exactly how they function. They all had in those days a line of 16 millimeter Bolex cameras with the 3 lenses on them, and they had a processing lab in the news building where you could immediately take your film and process it to get it on the nightly news. There was no video in those days, and the rock star president is going to parade through the very center of your town at 12:30 at lunchtime on a beautiful sunny day in November, and not one network sent a cameraman down there to film the president and his beautiful wife in their open limousine. But we show in the film that there were cameramen there, but they weren't filming the president. They were filming the bystanders. They were filming people running up the grassy knoll. They were filming people diving on the ground. But just when the president was going by, they just didn't feel like turning their cameras over that direction, which is an anomaly of the highest order, actually. And so the only person in the whole world that actually filmed it was Abraham Zapruder, a tailor who had an office, right nearby. He came by with his regular 8 movie camera and sat right in front of the grassy knoll on a podium and was really in the perfect place to film everything. And he was, of course, a 33rd degree Freemason. And Dallas is at 33 degrees latitude. And the Freemasonic building is right there at the triple underpass where the whole event took place. Kennedy's regime was called Camelot, which is which is King Arthur's regime. Clearly, Jackie was Guinevere. And this was a reenactment of the killing of the king, Freemasonic ritual. And done exactly in the right order and everything. And like all of the other rituals of the killing of the king, it's fabricated, it's theatrical, it's not real. They don't really kill the king. It's just all a fabricated thing. Just like in the old days, they used to kill the Pope. But they didn't really kill the Pope. They would fabricate that they killed the Pope, then the Pope would be reborn. It was this whole Catholic ritual that went on for a couple hundred years. And still, this is what I think is what the basis of some of this things that were going on November 22nd, 1963 were happening. Also, we should understand that November 22nd is also at the cusp of Scorpio and Sagittarius. It's also the beginning in the lunar month of Ophiuchus. The 13th sign starts on November 22nd. And it looks like the astrology was all figured out ahead of time and everything for this event to succeed. And that could be another whole film, by the way.
We could do a whole show with Julie on that one. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
She would love that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, so we just talked about the media, and why I set that up is because, of course, we don't have mainstream high-quality cameras of the exact shooting. They may exist, but we don't have them yet to this day, right? And so, but we do have the Zapruder film. And now controversy is coming out with the Zapruder film. Now, as you said, we've had the first iteration years after the assassination. It was very grainy, hard to tell. Then we had some people in Hanson movies. Part of that was used in the Oliver Stone movie. And to some extent now with new technologies, we're able to get in there. And there was also a bunch of researchers coming out who suggested that perhaps that Zapruder film had been faked somehow because there are so many anomalies, and not knowing why those anomalies were there or what they were specifically pointing to, they came to the conclusion that perhaps it had been faked. Now hold your horses on that for a second here. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go back down to the actual documentary here with Jay. And Jay, I want to play maybe a 2-minute clip where you're talking about these splices in the Zapruder film. And this is critical here for a moment. So let me see if I can bring this up for the audience. Show this one here. This one here. Okay, so we're going to play this 2-minute clip and get back to the conversation.
Something has been altered, and they're trying to remove it. So there is a splice in the Zapruder film. There's 2 splices in the Zapruder film. Time Life magazine, which owned the Zapruder film, did not tell the Warren Commission when they gave them a copy of the Zapruder film that there were 2 splices in it. Now, this is evidence being used in the murder of the President of the United States, and this evidence has been altered. There's frames missing from the Zapruder film at splice 212. There's frames 208, 209, 210, and 211 are missing from the Zapruder film. And this is obstruction of justice. This is interfering with evidence, interfering with an investigation. They have to tell the Warren Commission that there's 2 splices in that film. They have to tell the Warren Commission exactly how those 2 splices occurred and who is responsible for it. We do not know the name of the technician who caused the damage. And furthermore, It took them 4 years after the assassination for Time Life to admit there was any splices in the Zapruder film. I consider it an egregious crime that Time Life, first off, did the splice, and then secondly, didn't tell us about it.
Okay, I'm going to stop here. There's another minute into this clip, but I just want to address that. We cannot underestimate here what you're saying. This is falsification, or at least obstruction here of the evidence in the murder case of the U.S. Sitting president. Explain your reaction to that here, and share a little bit more details here as to the timeline and perhaps why, in your view, Time Life magazines was up to this particular shenanigan, Jay.
All right. So as soon as Zapruder shot the film, Time Life was like there. I mean, it was like within an hour. Time Life is offering him, I don't know what they offered him, a lot of money for the film. And he hadn't processed it or anything. He just had it in his camera. And so he agreed to do it. You know, it's weird. The whole thing, the telling of the story is very weird. And it sounds like it's contrived to me. Anyway, he does give it to them. They supposedly take it off, have it processed, and then now they have it in their hands. And then a week later, after the assassination, they show all the frames in the Time Life magazine. I mean, Life magazine. I have it over here somewhere. You know, all the frames of the film are in there. They're real grainy and hard to see, and you can't really make out what's going on too well. And it even looks like they may have reversed a couple frames, and it's useless. But so then the Warren Commission gets put in, and they request the Zapruder film, and Time Life gives them the Zapruder film without telling anyone that there's two splices, the most important splice at 212, because see, all the frames in films are counted. So you can tell if there's frames missing, because it's all counted. There's little numbers on the side that you can see if you know what you're looking for. And it just happens to be, I'm probably going to say this when you play the clip, but it just happens to be right when the limousine goes behind the freeway sign.
Right.
So the limousine passes behind the Stemmons freeway sign for maybe a third of a second, something really fast motion. And then that's when the action starts. So everything that I talk about in Jfk-X actually doesn't start until that splice. The splice at 212.
Thank you for that. Let me play that next 1 minute. We'll set that up and we'll come back to our conversation here. All right, here we go and play.
Didn't tell the Warren Commission about it, and the Warren Commission used the Zapruder film as their timeline, their clock. So even your clock is screwed up. It's missing by a quarter of a second at least. Time Life has to tell the Warren Commission that the Zapruder film has been altered. However, this splice at 212, at frame 212, is a very convenient splice. It occurs exactly when JFK's limousine goes behind the Stemmons freeway sign. So researcher Fred Newcomb, who's a JFK researcher, he did an examination of the Zapruder film, and he was fascinated by the splice as I was. And he did color balance reading on the film. He noticed there was definitely a color balance change in the film after the splice. He noticed that color balance was a bluer hue than the redder hue before the splice. What that tells me is that Zapruder was using daylight Kodachrome film. Kodak made two kinds of film for Kodachrome. They made daylight Kodachrome and they made indoor Kodachrome. The daylight Kodachrome is more balanced towards the red. The indoor Kodachrome is more balanced towards the blue. Fred Newcomb, finding that the color balance has shifted to blue after the splice, tells me that all the film after the splice has been run through some kind of optical printer, because the light that's used in an optical printer is an indoor light. Therefore, you'd want to use indoor Kodachrome for your copy.
Okay. Most researchers who are not into movie making would not know this necessarily, and it would not come up in some of this research. This is fascinating, to say the least here. Can I go further a little bit here? Yes. Let me play another 50 seconds on this clip, and we'll come back to this today.
So the Kennedys fly from D.C. to Fort Worth for a meeting. When they landed in Fort Worth, at the airport at Fort Worth, there were literally thousands of people. It was like the Beatles first landing in New York City. It was that crazy. People were screaming and cheering, and must have made the Kennedys actually very happy, because it was an incredibly jubilant crowd. And then later they took a short flight from Fort Worth to Dallas, and at the airport of Dallas again, there's thousands of people screaming and cheering, and everybody's really happy. The Kennedys are really happy. And then they take their limousine to go ostensibly to Dealey Plaza to the parade. And we can see there's no more than maybe 100 to 200 people. It's lunchtime, sunny day in Dallas, downtown Dallas. There's literally thousands of people working in the office buildings, and yet they can only muster up a couple of hundred maybe people to watch the rock star president and his wife. And then after the splice at 2:12, we hardly see anyone in Dealey Plaza watching the president. Maybe 8 people or 9 people behind him in that little park behind the limo, but that's all we see. It's not only the crowd that did a vanishing act here in Dealey Plaza, but Dallas had 3 network affiliates. They had NBC.
Okay, we talked about the media here. Now, what's interesting about less people at the critical event also suggests here, what you're getting at here too, is that there perhaps modification to the frame itself after the limousine goes through that highway sign. Explain that to the audience members, what you see there, and people can go watch the documentary and see all the details here. I don't want to give too much away here, but that's critical here in our view and our understanding of what just happened. Go ahead.
In fact, when I show the film to groups of people, and I show that one thing that you're talking about, there's an audible gasp in the audience. So they're like, they see it immediately. So after the splice, we have evidence, seriously good evidence, that there's been tampering on an optical printer. And what we see is that also Abraham Zapruder suddenly can't operate a camera anymore. Where he's got everybody in perfect middle of the frame through the entire shot. All of a sudden, at the critical moment, he starts apparently looking like he's panning up and dropping the limousine down to the bottom of the frame, so you can only see a little portion of what's going on. And I contend that that's the optical printing, that they moved, that they used a traveling mat, and they separated the limousine and the occupants from the background. They shrunk the limousine down so they could move it, and they moved it down to the lower part of the frame so you could not see what was actually going on. And the way that you know that this is true is because the people in the background there that you're showing are as big or bigger than the people in the car. That cannot be. See right there.
Yeah,
those people are that cannot be. And anyone who knows optics knows that the further an object is away from the lens, the smaller it is. It doesn't matter what lens it is. The optics always follow that law. Yet here we have a woman who is as big, her head is as big as the people in the car, maybe even bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what they did. They used an optical printer to hide the critical moment, and Time Life has to be involved in this, and everybody has to be involved. There can be no doubt about it.
The thing about moving the limousine down from the frame of view, also obfuscating perhaps what people are doing at the bottom of the car. We'll get into that in a moment here. So as a movie maker, talk about the difference between physical effects and digital effects. This is a very important part here, moving into setting up here this technology that perhaps was used here, in your opinion, with this documentary. So explain the 2 differences between these movie effects, Jay.
All right. So in movies, there's 2 kinds of effects. There's physical and digital. Now, digital, of course, only came around when computers and videotape were invented in 70s, really the late 70s, during Star Wars and those kinds of movies. So before then, everything was physical effects. And I love physical effects. I'm actually kind of an expert on physical effects, and I had to learn because I was making my own movies. So I had to learn how to make, somebody's head look like it exploded, or a car flipping over. And there's all these tricks that you learn in filmmaking. And like Christopher Nolan, the filmmaker, he loves physical effects. And that's why I like his films, because he eschews digital, and I can't stand digital. And it just is, I guess, because I'm an old filmmaker, I just don't, it doesn't look right to me. Digital looks phony, but physical doesn't look phony, and I love physical. So in a movie, when a guy falls off a building or a car flips over or whatever, that's a physical effect. The car really is flipping over. The guy really is falling off of a building. There's, you know, cushions and boxes and stuff to absorb the hit and everything, but you know, those are physical effects. And digital effects are now taking over from physical effects because they're safer, cheaper, all the rest. The physical effects are not safe. They're very dangerous, very dangerous. I've seen many people get really, really hurt doing physical effects. And so it's really important to understand that there's a physical effect called that they used very rarely until the 1970s in Hollywood, and it's called a squib. And a squib is how they fake a gunshot wound in Hollywood. Now, when I was young, I'd go see like Gregory Peck Westerns and stuff, and he would get shot and there'd be a quarter size blood spot on his, you know, his stomach, and we would all in the theater, oh, that's so fake, that's not what it would look like, right? And I remember all my friends saying, because we were all hunters, and we knew exactly what a gunshot looks like. And so when my generation started making movies in the 70s, we said, no way. It was like a collective, no way, we're never going to show BS gunshots. We're going to try to show as realistic a gunshot as possible. And so finally the use of squibs got to be used a lot more starting in the late 70s, 80s. And Quentin Tarantino, of course, is the absolute master of the squib. He loves them. Hey, Quentin, go watch my film and then tell everybody what you see. I really mean that. And so squib is a device that it has like a thin metal plate on the bottom, and then it has a small pile of gunpowder over the top, and then fake blood is placed over the top of that. And then if you're really good at it, you put like styrofoam chunks in there and stuff to make it look like bullet brain matter and stuff. Then the whole thing's wrapped up in a prophylactic. And then they put a sticky substance underneath it so they can stick it on the actor, right? So the actor gets the squib, he has it put on their chest, let's say. Then there's a string that goes under the shirt, down the pants. There's a technician below who pulls the string, which ignites the squib. And so the director goes 3, 2, 1, and the actor, you know, does their reaction. So look, and the thing explodes, and it's very effective in movies, and it looks really good. You add in sound later, and it looks like you just watched somebody get hit with a gunshot, sort of. I mean, you know, it doesn't really look like that. Gunshots are not. When a bullet hits something, it doesn't explode where it hits. It might explode on the other side when coming out of something. Right. But when if a bullet hit me here, there's not going to be this big explosion.
Right. No, if you're a hunter, you'll know that the exit wound is often way bigger than the entry wound. That gets into the question of blood also. Supposedly in the Warren Commission here, he shot twice, once in the neck first. They missed the second shot, and then in the head. But even that neck wound, if that were to be true, just looking at the video, there's no blood in the video, and it should be spewing like crazy if that were a real gunshot wound. This is a high caliber rifle shooting through very soft tissue. The damage would already be extensive there just with the neck wound. So
he would have been bled out within 30 seconds if he'd been shot in the neck. Any hunter will tell you that.
So I think we can leave that one alone. It's so obvious to me that the neck theory explosion doesn't really work. So let's put that aside, and we can let other people debate that one. It's been done ad nauseum. But I want to get into the actual clip here and look at the clues as to why perhaps there's certain movements that JFK is doing here could suggest that he is setting up for the shot here for this squib technology. But before we get into that too, there's a critical point here also. Suddenly, as we start getting into these frames here, the Secret Service are called back from around the limousine. Explain that first, and then we'll get into the squib technology. Jay.
Yeah, so the Secret Service, they're trained to run on the side of the slow going limo so they can get hit basically by any shrapnel or bullets or whatever to protect the president. That's what they're hired to do. And you can see, we show a clip in the movie. One of the Secret Service guys is running up to the limousine to go do his job, and he's clearly called back by his superior. Hey, get away from there! Come back. And he's like, "What do you mean? What do you mean? We're not going to cover the president? All these open windows and everything." And and I believe that was done to limit the amount of witnesses. I also believe that's why there's very few people in Dealey Plaza after the splice, because again, it's to limit the amount of witnesses and keep everything as tightly controlled as possible. We all know that Secret Service went and collected all the cameras, all of the photographs, everything is immediately after the so-called assassination. And all the witnesses said, no, I gave my camera to this guy who claimed he was in the Secret Service, and they all got confiscated and they were never seen again.
And just to be clear, they're doing that today too. I was watching their video the other day of Kim Jong-un, and all the Secret Service are running next to the limousine. This is still standard practice even today in 2024. Okay, let's go back to, let me see if I can bring this up for the audience here. We'll play this clip here. I'm not sure I'm exactly at the right spot here, but we see that first scene here where he seems to be grabbing something, and the Warren Commission, he said he's holding at his neck. But if that were the case here, we'd already see big blood spatter, which we don't. But again, we'll move past here and explain this here. I'll keep going here, but explain what you think is the sequence of events here, and why it's being obfuscated at the bottom of the screen.
Let's roll through this, and then we'll roll back again.
Okay.
Okay, that's the film, the high quality film. You notice there's no brain matter or anything on the back trunk or anything. Let's go back and start that again then. I will show you.
And so far, except for that little puff of smoke around his head, there's no blood on anybody else, on the seat in front, on his wife either. So let me just scroll back here. I'll go that. It's a little bit harder to do on this screen here. We'll see if
I get you.
Point. Okay, hold on. Come on.
You can do it.
There you go.
All right. So he comes behind the freeway sign, and he's supposedly grabbing the neck wound with no blood, but he's not really grabbing the neck at all. What he's really doing is he's reaching into his jacket and he's pulling something out, and he's placing it right here on the right side of his face. And you can clearly see it in the shot. And it's right casting a shadow in the noonday sun. There it is. It's right there on the side of his face. Jim Fetzer, who studied the Zapruder film extensively, he calls that the blob, and he believes that it was done post in the studio later with a paint or something. He can't understand what he's looking at, so he writes in his book, The Zapruder Film Hoax, that the blob is evidence that this film has been tampered with. But he never questions why there is no blood on the neck wound, and why Kennedy actually is not really gripping his neck. If you actually look at the shot where he's supposedly gripping his neck, his hands are actually here. They're not up here. And the right hand.
2 things to notice too. If he's shot in the neck, his white collar is still white. His cufflinks and cuffs there are still absolutely white. She has no blood on her. Like this,
it would be hitting, honestly, just I don't want to gross anybody out. It would be hitting the back seat of the car in front of him. It would be shooting out. I mean, it would be so grotesque that you really wouldn't even be able to look at it. But there's no blood at all. And when they took a picture of the back seat of the car at Parkland Hospital, there was probably a tablespoon of blood on the back seat, something like that. It didn't even look real, to be honest with you.
Yeah. No, a head wound and a neck wound at that point would be devastating. Okay. So how far further else do I go with this? So essentially here, spell it out to people. What do you think just happened here? So there seems to be a coordination also with his wife. She seems to be in on the move. Why is she hopping on the back of the limousine? Also in the mainstream news, they were saying that she was trying to get a piece of his head that had flown out. That's the main story. But how do you associate that now with the script technology? What is she doing? What's her role in all of this?
All right. So first I want to point out that when the car comes behind the freeway sign, every single occupant in that car, the driver, the Secret Service agent to his right, John Connolly and John Connolly's wife are all looking at JFK, all of them. You can see it in the film. All 4 people, not Jackie, though. Jackie is nonchalantly looking off to her left as if nothing happened. Don't forget, high-powered rifle shots are ringing out here. 30 caliber rifle shots. I don't know if you know how loud those are, but they're really loud. And in a cavernous downtown area, it's going to be even louder. But nobody in the car is reacting to rifle shots. They're all looking at JFK. And as soon as, so I'm just going to say it. So JFK, for reasons that we talk about in the movie, he places something right here on his face, and you can clearly see it. And Oliver Stone cuts those frames out of his movie, by the way. So you do not see it in his movie. It's clearly cut out of the movie. So for 2 full seconds after he comes from behind the freeway sign, we can see something weird on the side of his face. Then suddenly everybody's looking at him in the limousine. Jackie decides to get involved. She comes around to the front and looks at Jack from the front. Oh, there we conveniently go down to where nobody can see anything. And we can't see what she does. And then the head explodes. Jackie gets out of the car and runs over and picks something up. We could be that the Secret Service agent also was going after that same thing, and then runs back into the car. Exactly the opposite of what any sane person would do if your husband had just been hit by a high-powered weapon 1 foot away from you. You would be on the floor of the car, cowering. Anybody would. It's no disrespect to Jackie Kennedy. Anybody would be doing the same thing. But Jackie does the opposite. She goes out and exposes herself even more to the would-be shooters, intentionally grabbing something off the hood, which in our enhanced version you can actually see. So what is it? What's the mystery? What's going on here? Well, I mean, I really want you to go see my film. And it's on Amazon Prime. It's only $1.98, and international people can see it on Vimeo. But my contention is that for various reasons, John F. Kennedy faked his death. And the Zapruder film, the enhanced Zapruder film, shows that. And he did it for whatever reason. Now Jackie's coming around. We do cut away. Okay. And what Jackie is doing is she's coming around and she's reaching up and she's pulling the string on the squib, which is what is right here on the side of his face. And they had to optically lower the car to the bottom of the frame to hide Jackie's hands and what she's doing. That's pretty much it. And there we go. Now it was mysteriously lowered in the frames. And then Jackie comes around and gets involved in the whole operation. Jack, of course, once you see the explosion, again, when a bullet hits your head, it doesn't explode. But that I'm not going to argue anymore about that. But are we going to see it here? Okay. Now we see something silvery rolling up the side up right above his ear, rolling up the side of the face. That's the silver, the metal plate that is at the bottom of the squib. It rolled off his head, and she's going to retrieve it. That's what she's doing. She's retrieving the metal plate that rolled off his head, because the squib gets really hot from the explosion, causes the metal to bend and shape. It happens all the time in movies. And that's why you'll see the explosion and they'll cut away, because they don't want you to see what happens after the bullet goes off, because it'll be a dead giveaway. And so what we're seeing here is a Hollywood effect. And we speculate as to what's going on here and why. And I think that JFK had to get away from his enemies because he had just stoked too many fires, and he did not know who he was dealing with until it was too late. And then it was, and let's not forget, we show it in the movie, that FBI informant recorded a mobster saying that they were going to hit JFK. There'd been a hit on JFK ordered by the mob. And this was in October, a month before the JFK assassination. For sure, the FBI told JFK that there was a mob hit out on him. So he knew it. He knew there was a hit out on him. He had to. They would have been derelict of duty not to have informed him. So we played the tape recording in the movie of the hit of the FBI recording of the guy saying we're going to hit him from an office building.
It would be complete negligence to not take extra precautions when you already have death threats on the books, so to speak.
Exactly, but they didn't take any precautions.
Let me bring this up, and I don't want to go in here too. Like, you're already giving a lot away here, Jay. And I do, again, guys, I recommend you guys go check this out. So first of all, if you go to jfkx.org, this is the website where you can get both links here, as Jay was talking about. So the U.S. International market here, if you click on this link, it will bring you to the Amazon Prime link. And if you're outside of the U.S., as I was here, I went through the Vimeo link. So both of those links here for the U.S. and international are available on this page, and they're also here in the description box below this video. Now, it doesn't end there. So what's that guy, Ron Popeil, the commercial guy, is like, but there's more. So there's a lot more, guys, to this documentary, and I'm just going to hint that in here now. We're not going to get into the details, but there's a dead ringer for JFK, who also is killed on this day, and who perhaps has a big role to play here in the discrepancies and why some of the autopsy and some of the doctors are saying there's something wrong here between the Warren Commission and what we're seeing here on the table. I'll let you guys go watch the documentary to get into those details, but they're fascinating. Just that piece alone, again, brings up so many questions. And on top of that, too, there is the question here also of another lover of JFK, who just soon after his death also dies in a very mysterious way, again without any fanfare, again without any evidence as to who the killer might be, raising a lot of questions as to maybe those people had planned to exit this stage together. Again, go see the documentary. There's a lot there.
There is a lot there, actually.
Right. Like I said, there's more, guys. This is so worth the price of entry for this documentary, guys. I can't recommend it enough. But here's where I want to go. We're already an hour into it. I hope we've done a good job with the audience members, showing them, wow, this crazy gets crazier and crazier. The story does. But I want to bring it back to one. Even after this fact, if you go look at some of these enemies, nobody's copped to this yet, and the mob also has not copped to this yet. And a lot of those mobsters are like, well, I think Jimmy did it, and I think Bobby did it, but they still don't know who did it, right? So there's you would think after all of this time that we would have had an inclination as to who done it, but also we would have think that our judicial system, having all of the pressure of the American people around the world asking for serious questions to be answered, you would think that they would go through that process. Your contention, Jay, is that they're not going there because that's not the real story. That's not what happened. And they cannot go through that process of answering some of those questions. It would betray the whole reason for this particular event on that day. So now, having said that, guys, go look at the autopsy stuff, this Tippett guy, go look at this lover story. But now let's go a little bit further. And we're going to come back to the beginning of the show. When we talked about all these enemies, I said to Jay, we have all these enemies lined up, but who are above them? Now, at this point, Jay, maybe this is more opinion, maybe this is just conjecture, maybe it's conspiracy theory. How does that tie into what we're seeing now? As you discussed, we just have this new series now, the Angels and the Great Deception Exposed. We're looking at a big way here, the Elohim and how they affected our world. Speak about why perhaps this event happened the way it did and how this is setting up, or that event set up, what we're seeing now here, the fight with the White Hats, the alliance, the Trump administration, all of these generals that were fired under the previous administrations coming together in this MAGA hat scenario, and how that ties into, yes, I'm going to go there, the Space Force. Jay.
Ooh, that's a big one. So first off, you should know that JFK Jr. and Donald Trump were good friends before JFK Jr. left this world, if that's what he did. And so that's one thing you should know. But the other thing is that's important is that Bobby Kennedy, his attorney general, his brother, he went after the mob, and he began finding out, and we say it in the movie, we actually quote him, show him saying it, that he's found evidence that the mob is inside the government. In 1962, he said this, right? And I believe that Kennedy was put in office by a group of very wealthy people who wanted him to find out the truth about what's really going on in the world. And he put Bobby in because he trusted him as his brother. And Bobby went out and was the bulldog looking into all of this stuff. And with his knowledge of the space program, the secret space program, and what they were really doing, and we don't know what they were really doing. He did, but we don't. I believe that they got in contact with, I don't know if they're ETs or what they are, but these forces that have been governing the earth for a long, long time. And I actually believe that Trump got in office with the same intention, to find out what was really going on. And that's why he'll never be allowed back, I believe. And
well, they're doing their darn best to not having back with all these shenanigans in Colorado and Maine and the ticket.
We're moving into a different era, and they're not able to keep things contained anymore. And they're finding that very, very frustrating. What they're doing anyway is incredibly insane, because the Supreme Court ruled years ago that a president can't be held for anything that happens while he's in office. So that's going to end up being the ruling. So why are we wasting our time with any of this? You know how many illegal things a president does every day? I mean, they order assassinations. They do all sorts of things that are illegal. If you start holding the president up for what he agrees to do while he's in office, every president would be capital punishment. We get capital punishment. So, you know, the whole thing is ridiculous. So I believe that the other thing that's important in all of this is to remember that Kennedy was also in ONI, the Office of Naval Intelligence. That's what the PT boats were in World War II. They were intelligence boats. They were going, giving in and out, using their skiffs to get in and out, to look at places and take pictures and all the rest. They didn't fight. They were intelligence gathering boats. And Kennedy was in ONI, and so was Forrestal. He was the head of the Secretary of Navy before he became Secretary of Defense. The Navy.
He was part of naval intelligence too. Yeah.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
The Navy is the group that's really involved in all of this stuff. The Navy ran NASA until Space Force took over. The Navy is the elite part of the military. It's considered the most elite part. The elites themselves, if they're going to send their children into the military, tend to send them into the Navy. Kennedy didn't have to go to the Navy. He was a rich kid. He could have gotten out of it, but he didn't. He served in World War II and got wounded badly, and probably ended up costing him his life because he got Addison's disease from his service there. And that probably crippled him and probably ended his life early anyway. And so Kennedy went up against a bunch of forces that he thought were disparate forces. He thought the mob was different than the CIA, and the CIA was different than the central bankers and all this. But he didn't realize that actually after World War II, they all joined together. Yeah, it was like a giant merge. And I think that's what Bobby discovered. Bobby discovered that, holy crap, you know, the mob and the CIA and the bankers, and they're all together in one big thing. And then at that point, it was like, holy, we cannot fight against this. This is too big for two brothers to fight against. And
well, not at that time. And so that sets up to perhaps this where we're at today. So let me bring that up. Just the other day, let me see if I can bring this one up for the audience, a different slide deck here. U.S. Space Command reaches full operational capability. This leads into what you were saying here, how 2024 might be a game changer. This was published on December 18th on Zero Hedge. And I said, oh yeah, ready to fight the Elohim or into a new battleground, if you want to put it that way. And what was interesting here, Shadow of Ezra said, hey, Donald Trump created the Space Force and it has zero ties to all previous administrations. That's important in the context where Jay is saying that the mob had already infiltrated our government system, that the Khazarian mafia, the Zionists, whatever you want to call it, had infiltrated the judicial system. Having suddenly a Space Force, a fully funded Space Force, not attached to any of these older associations that might be, and for all intents and purposes, we can argue, are all beholden here to this Khazarian mafia, or at least the stooges from this Elohim worship cult, if you want to call it that, then suddenly this makes a lot of sense. Tie that into perhaps where this goes now in 2024, the research of Biglino, but how we're hearing also some whistleblowers here at the military level also suggesting now or changing slightly their narrative to suggest that not only are we already in contention with space aliens, but that we might be in a big way, in a physical way, and very visible way for the rest of the human population here very soon. Jay.
Yeah, that could be happening. I've heard from some of my intelligence sources that they are going to release the alien news here soon. They haven't yet, so I don't know. We'll see. I don't even know if there are aliens. That could be another BS story for all we know. It could be just people that lived here on Earth somewhere that we don't know about, who are very advanced.
Yeah,
who are just very advanced. I don't know. I really don't know. I know this, that some intelligence group that appears to be somewhat humanoid has been messing with the human race for a long, long time. I did a whole lecture at the UFO conference in Vegas in 2019 on it. I called them the others. At the time, I didn't know what they were. I talked all about Jacques Vallée's work and Messengers of Deception, about how he keeps finding evidence of these guys going way, way back. They have been using the human race for a whole bunch of reasons, for farming, sex, who knows, genetic experiments, all sorts of stuff. And all this information started coming out in the early 1900s. People were heading out to different parts of the earth and talking to different people for the first time and bringing back knowledge. A lot of it was German. A lot of it was mostly Germans. Actually, it was Germans mostly that were going out to Tibet and to Russia, and the Russians also were doing it. And they brought back all of this knowledge, and they had to have figured it out. They had to have said, oh my God, there's a force bigger than us that's ruling everything, and basically there's nothing that we can do about it. I think that's the same conclusion that the Kennedys reached, that there was nothing that they personally could do about it. They set in motion several things that were really good that later are going to end up maybe helping us. But yeah, I think that we are talking about, okay, I'm going to get into this. There is a war. There has been a war between Majestic 12 and a group within the Office of Naval Intelligence that is ostensibly called COM 12. And COM 12 is 12 top dudes that are from the Navy who are literally fighting against the Majestic 12 people. I have no idea what they're fighting about. But I have no idea. I can guess, I can make some conjectures, but it would just be that. And if you look, you'll see the remnants of this entire war. Now, what's his name? The guy that hacked the Pentagon, I'm going to forget his name, the hacker that hacked the Pentagon in the early 2000s, he's from Scotland.
The guy with the red hair, they wanted extradition for him there. And you saw the sheet of extra officers. That one, McKinnon.
Yeah, Gary McKinnon.
Yeah.
He said that all the ships that were in the secret space force were named after famous admirals. Remember?
Mhm.
All of them. So that right away told, oh, this is all a Navy operation, right? That's what this is, and I've got it, and I'd already done enough investigation into understanding the origins of NASA and its Navy or origins. And so what I'm saying is the Navy always thought they were always the top intelligence agency for the United States, all the way up until 1947. When they created the CIA. And the CIA superseded the ONI as the top intelligence agent. And ONI never got over it, never got over this. And they started immediately a war against the CIA. And it's been going on ever since the CIA was created. Kennedy was Navy. He was put in. Carter was ONI. He put in Admiral Stansfield Turner to run the CIA, causing the CIA to lose their cookies. They couldn't believe that there was an admiral running the place, right? Immediately he fires, on Halloween night, I think 1978, he fires several hundred people in the CIA, including all of George Bush's friends and associates who were associated with some certain things, and then but that didn't clear the problem up. It actually made it worse, because what happened is, we now know this from Oliver North and the Iran-Contra, that these 200 or 300 fired CIA agents created another agency, a secret agency that went about the earth with nobody watching them now, with funding themselves with drug money and
narcotics. Yeah, exactly.
Narcotics, yeah. And so so the Office of Naval Intelligence is the white hats. I don't know how white hat they are. I've talked to some of them. They seem like they're pretty cool guys. They're definitely no more than me, that's for sure. And they are at war with the representatives of the Elohim, you might say. I don't know what else I can get into further, but I mean, and again, all this sounds so crazy, but remember that we're moving into an era now where all of this is all going to be known pretty soon. And I mean all of it. It's just all going to be known. And we're all just going to go, yeah, so what? And right now, we're just in that beginning stage where we're in shock from seeing what we're seeing. And Jfk-X is part of that shock. And I'm making 2 or 3 more films in the next year and a half that are just going to be one shock after another. And if you watch them all at the same time, you'll probably end up having a heart attack or something. But so yeah, that's what's going on here, and it's all entwined. We have the one president who, there's another thing that people don't know about. Serious JFK researchers know this, but hardly anybody else does. And that is, I'm going to be very careful what I say here. Joe Kennedy, JFK's dad, was in the mob. He ran alcohol from Canada during Prohibition. Okay. He was a secretary, I believe he was Secretary of State under Roosevelt. And he went to Hollywood and called all the producers in Hollywood together and told them not to make any anti-German propaganda films. And I just bring that up for another reason. It was also well known that Joe Kennedy was very, very aware of the Khazarian mafia, very, very aware, and told all of his sons to be wary of them because they cannot be trusted. Now, hang on. Here's where it gets really good. Donald Trump, when he got out of business school, he went to his dad, who was a famous construction builder in Queens and Brooklyn. And he pointed across the river and he said to his dad, I'm going over there, meaning Manhattan. I'm going over there to make my fortune. I'm not going to be building stuff in Queens. I'm building stuff there. And his dad said, son, you better be real careful messing with those people, because those people will kill you. And this is a true story. I've heard 100 times from people who know Trump. And Trump said, no, I'm going to do it. And Trump went right into the nest there and you know, got messed up with them. And who knows what he discovered, right? I mean, who knows? So both the Kennedys and Trump have a bunch of stuff in common. One, neither one of them started a war when they were president. Two, they both were interested in the space program heavily. Three, they both were cool on Israel. They weren't the hot presidents all the other presidents were. Kennedy didn't want Israel to have any nuclear missiles. He was, we were not going to give them to him. And Trump, although he seemed on the surface to be rah, 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 actually, and I'm sure this is one of the reasons he's no longer in office, he refused to do a whole lot of things that the KM wanted him to do.
Yeah, I think for the public, he was like just paying lip service, but that's the extent.
Paying lip service. And so they would say, oh, bomb Iran. And then he would go all the way up to the edge where he's going to bomb Iran. No, I'm not going to do it. Right. And you know, over and over he did this. And I'm sure that after a while he picked up the pattern and realized that he was not cooperating anymore with what they wanted. And then he had to go, and they put in a guy who would cooperate. So there are these things, these weird things that they do have in common. So when I hear these crazy conspiracy theories, I say, oh, well, JFK's still alive and he's going to come back. And I don't believe any of that. But I do believe that there is a very serious connection between the Trump and the Kennedys. And I bet you RFK Jr. Is part of this in some way.
Well, I think you're right, and I think there's maybe more to be uncovered, and it's coming very soon. You could feel that it's bubbling to the surface now. I wanted to share just a quick personal anecdote to all of this too, and it ties into World War II, the Office of Naval Intelligence, and how everything was structured after World War II. My grandfather served in the European theater of war during World War II, and when he came back, he started working for the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And for all our lives, we understood that he was basically a mailman in the RCMP. And only after he died did we find out quite a few medals and certificates of awards and badges that had something to do with way more than just carrying the mail. So there was a remnants there too of what he had done during World War II that had been brought under here the RCMP in Canada at the time. And I wish I could have talked to him about this. Of course, we found all of this out after he died. But when I started my YouTube channel, and I got deleted the first time through some of the censorship, I had a dream about him, a very visceral dream about him. And he says, you know, Jean-Claude, you're fighting the same people I was fighting in World War II. And so it kind of brought me all back into, oh, okay, we all have a role to play here in extricating ourselves perhaps from this control of the Elohim. And this is why the Jfk-X documentary that you've so beautifully put together is important to watch here, because it's a pivotal moment in our human history where perhaps the fight that was above ground that the Kennedys were trying to attempt here suddenly went covert. And now, if you look at some of the WebAud data reports from Clough High, some of the predictions in there in the predictive linguistics are suggesting that the SOC, the self-organizing collective, or what you just call now the white hats, we're getting to a point where those are going to become overt again and start to harmonize with the forces of the people here who are the truther community, the conspiracy theories, the people who, like Carrie says in her book, have that rebel gene that do not want to comply, right? We're coming to that critical moment. So maybe we can end on that. First of all, is there anything I missed that's absolutely important for you to share here that you think is important for people to know going into the documentary, one? And two, let's talk about our role individually, collectively here, moving into 2024, and this harmonization perhaps with some of the strategies and tactics in the war against the Elohim that JFK was involved in before this cover-up of his death. So two things.
Yeah, so we are now like I said earlier, it's like the fog is all lifting, and it is for me. I don't know. I think it is for everybody, and everyone has this matter of fact attitude now about all of this, whereas before they didn't believe it. Now it's just matter of fact. So I think that we're going to come to the realization that all the things that we think or fantasize that are going on are actually going on. Yeah. And that once we come to that, then we can extrapolate and see where this is all going. But the Elohim don't really like to be exposed. So we're going to see where they take the next level of this thing. I'm looking for some really high level trickery to go on here by them to fool us in some way. I have no idea what that would be.
You mean like false flags, changing the channel on all of this?
Yep. Okay. Yep. And so I'm looking for that, but I think at the same time they can't do anything about what's happening. It's something beyond them. It's something. It has to do again with the changing of the yugas and the newer age coming in, and different kinds of way of thinking, and more openness to ideas that we had before, and I don't think there's anything that they can do about it. They didn't see Jfk-X coming. They went out of their way to discredit it. I can't get any interviews with anybody. You're the only powered person that's interviewed me. Jeff Rentz won't. I was on Jeff Rentz probably 100 times in the past. I never asked for a penny. Same thing with Jimmy Church. I never asked for a penny. I was on his show dozens of times, and not one of those guys will give me the time of day. I'm sorry, but I'm kind of pissed off about it. And I said to writer, filmmaker, I said early on when we were making the film, I said, you watch. Not one American will pay attention to this. It's going to be somebody who's not an American who's going to be the first person to come forward and talk about it. And sure as hell, that's exactly what happened. And I think it's because all I can tell you is this. All of the people from not America who have watched the film have been very appreciative of it and have written me and said, oh my God, I finally get what's happening and all of that. The Americans, however, while they won't debate me, they refuse to debate me, they are very good at calling me names. So I'm getting a lot of nasty emails from people calling me all sorts of names, and nobody will debate the facts. And so, I understand where this was. I did that with the Kubrick and the moon landing. I know where this goes, and pretty soon it's just going to be matter of fact. And it's not going to be the boomers or the Xers. It's going to be the millennials who are going to be the generation just going to go, oh, yeah, that's what happened. And that'll be it. And it'll be over finally.
Speaking to why perhaps you're not being interviewed by other sources, I think you were privy to some of the conversations there, and Cliff High tweeted this the other day too, and how we were bribed here and we were kind of manhandled to stay away from some topics last year. And I said, no, I just want to do what I want to do. So maybe the people you're talking about there to have controllers and handlers that don't let them get into some of these topics here. So this is why these platforms are so important. And, I might not get it right all the time. I sure as hell don't. I'm not perfect, but I'm going where the information is leading me. And I want to have full autonomy on having these interviews and these conversations with people. And that's why that's so important. And that's why I'm so appreciative of everybody who supports us on Beyond Mystic and here on Rumble. You guys are absolutely amazing. And so we have about 7,000 people watching now between all three platforms today on X, YouTube, and on Twitter. We might have to delete this one from YouTube, Jay. So I'll have to go and re-listen after the show, but we'll leave it here for sure on Rumble. Fascinating conversation again. Congratulations. And Jay, there was a lot of people at the beginning of the show, and I forgot to mention, I was handling 2 different slide decks today, but in the chat, people were saying how brave you are for putting this forward. And I agree. And I would suggest also that you're very brave for the second part of this interview, also getting into the crux of the matter and the overarching issue that really sets the stage for all of these conspiracy theories and where we're going together as a human race. I think that's where a lot of our conversations need to go, even though we are being discouraged from having those conversations. Jay, last words of wisdom before we go here today. Anything else you want to share with the honest members, either about Jfk-X or about moving into 2024 and how to be a better versions of ourselves as humans?
Well, we are getting better and things are going to improve very rapidly. And you're going to notice the improvement every day. And it's going to get better. And the truth is going to come shining through and they can't stop it. And I just want to say, Jean-Claude, you're amazing, man. I really, really, really appreciate you. And I know the hard work that you do to get this out. And I know the kind of pressures that you're under. I've been there, and you may call me brave, but you're brave too, man. That's to do this every day like you do it. That's tenacious.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Jay. I really do. And coming from you, I really appreciate that. That makes me warm in the heart and almost on the side of crying. So I think I'll say thank you to you, Jay, and thank you to everyone joining. Oh, do you have anything else you want to add? Go ahead.
Nope.
No? Okay. So thank you so much, Jay. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about this crazy documentary, some of the opinions put forward, some of the evidence put forward here, and how that really changes our worldview moving forward, and how it's important for each and every one of you watching the show here to pick up the baton, share this knowledge, share these documentaries with your friends and family, and work together here to move forward for humanity. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. This was, of course, the Jfk-X documentary with Mr. Jay Weidner, and I'm Jean-Claude. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.